What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are here with what's probably the most entertaining story from Spider-Verse, which is Miles Morales and Spider-Man from the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon show meets Spider-Man from the 1960s cartoon show. And it's amazing. I love this story. It's just so much fun, right? It's just a fun story to read. So as we kind of mentioned in the last video, right, the Miles and we're just gonna call him Ultimate Spider-Man, it's just easier that way. But Miles and Ultimate Spider-Man basically ended up in this universe because they're basically trying to find more Spider-Man. And this, I mean, it's basically what it was, what you saw in the cartoon show, right? Where it's pretty straightforward. There's like only one building with a sign on it, and that sign is Daily Bugle, so they know like exactly where to go to find Spider-Man. But like J. Jonah Jameson, he's hilarious in this, right? So he's like, pay attention, Parker. He's like, we've had reports of 2 Spider-Men swinging around, making spectacles of themselves. And Peter's like, 2 Spider-Men? He's like, do you know what that means, Parker? And he's like, well, I don't know. I mean, criminals have impersonated Spider-Man before. He's like, Balderdash! The web-headed menace finally showed his true colors. He's put together a gang of crooks to terrorize the city. Get me proof! J. Jonah Jameson became Americans in the 21st century. I have a conclusion. Now I need evidence to support it. And it's just like, okay, all right, J. Jonah Jameson. So anyway, you end up picking up with Ultimate Spider-Man and Miles, of course, as they're on the hunt for 60s Spider-Man, and ultimately they find him. But as you guys, if any of you guys ever saw the 1960s Spider-Man cartoon, and if you didn't, it was amazing. Dude, old school Spider-Man was hilarious. But this episode was actually based off a story called To Catch a Spider, right? Which was basically Dr. Noah Body, who essentially unleashes like Electro and like Green Goblin and these guys to take out Spider-Man. But unlike the original show, the original cartoon, this basically takes place in its stead, or at least partly takes place in its stead. So what goes on here, and it's kind of a funny thing, is Miles and Ultimate Spider-Man are talking to like 60 Spider-Man, right? And 60 Spider-Man's like, okay, you imposters can unmask and surrender right now, or I can web you up and we'll do it at the police station. Your choice, chums. Now, Ultimate Spider-Man is hilarious here, right? Because he's like, okay, stay back, Miles, I got this, man. Like, I'm well versed in this kind of talk. So he's like, get hip to this, daddy-o. There's a heavy scene going down, and we ain't got time for a lot of ramalama ding dog, you dig? And 60 Spider-Man's like, the hard way it is, and like, he webs them up. Now at that point, Miles comes in, and Miles is like, no, you got the wrong idea, man. He's like, we're Spider-Man from a different dimension. And then like literally that's what he says, right? He's like, we're Spider-Man from like other dimensions. There's like a giant menace that we have to deal with, and we need help. And like 60 Spider-Man's like, oh, well, why didn't you just say so? That explains everything. It was hilarious because at that point in time, like the way Spider-Man was depicted is he was just so, I don't know, maybe naive or something like that. But it was almost kind of adorable, right? And it was kind of funny. Plus, he would complain a lot. In the 1960s show, he would complain all the time. I mean, I guess technically it was a 1967 show, but like he would complain a lot. He'd be like, I'm hot in my Spider-Man suit, and swinging around is making me even hotter, and these stupid villains are escaping, and now I'm gonna have to beat them to death. Like he would complain all the time. But again, the whole thing ends up kind of playing out where he's like, okay, cool, like I'll go with you guys to go on this great big huge adventure, but I need to take up this thing first, right? This guy, Dr. Noah Body, has basically released the Vulture and Electro and Green Goblin and Scorpion, and I gotta deal with them first. Right now, here's the funny thing. As soon as these guys show up, I mean, it's designed to look like the 60s show, so like they look goofy and they look kind of silly, and whenever Green Goblin was riding around on his Goblin glider in like the 60s cartoon, it looked like he was powering it by farts, not even gonna lie. But the whole thing about that is, of course, they're able to overpower them momentarily, but Mr. Noah Body, who's basically invisible, has like this ray gun that basically incapacitates them, and then the villains do what they always did in the show, which was bicker amongst themselves and then ultimately get themselves caught. Now, in that whole thing where this whole kind of situation's going on, like 60 Spider-Man's like, well, the last time I beat him, I used ventriloquism, but I don't know if that'll work this time. And of course, it ends up coming by way of Ultimate Spider-Man, who basically webs up their legs and then essentially takes out Mr. Noah Body, which, allows Miles Morales to, kind of step up and then, use his Venom Blast to electrocute Mr. Noah Body and take him out, and all those guys are defeated, and basically the day's saved. And then you get to what's quite possibly one of the more questionable moments of the comic. Which I guess it kind of depends on which direction you're coming from. But basically, once they're all together, it's almost like the old throwback to like the the old Justice League, right? Like when they all masked and they all learned their identities. But basically, like Ultimate Spider-Man reveals his identity as Peter Parker, and then Miles Morales reveals his identity, and then like 1960 Spider-Man's like walloping web snappers. I mean, he doesn't say like he's not. it's not like he's like, you're black. Like, it's not anything like that. He's just like surprised he's a high school kid. But like, Christos Gage was kind of going with that, right? Kind of like, you know, building up to that little bit of comedy. And Ultimate Spider-Man's like, oh snap, man, tell me that like the 1960s Spider-Man isn't old-fashioned in all the bad ways too, you know? But Ultimate, and it's one of those things where Miles was kind of expecting it, right? Miles was kind of like, all right, I'm gonna take off this mask in front of this 1960s white dude. We're gonna see what happens, right? And then, you know, he's like, walloping web snappers. And Miles like, man, don't you say it. And he's like, you're a high school kid. Miles like, awesome, dude. I'm not gonna have to beat the hell out of you. Because I'll be honest, man, I feel like Miles would have, dude. Miles would have beat the tar out of this guy. Like, say what? You know, and would have just lost it on him. It would have been hilarious, but he would have totally lost it on him. But nonetheless, the two of them basically end up going forward and bringing in like 1960s Spider-Man as a way to basically combat the Inheritors. But yeah, okay, now this is something else that I also want to point out here. So the way these Spider-Verse team-up stories were done is they were basically A-side stories and B-side stories. You essentially get part one, then you get part two. So if you guys want in the future stories that we do or the future videos that we do, we can cover both parts. Let me know if you guys want to see both parts in a single video or if you want to focus on like just each individual part as its own video. Let me know what you guys are interested in seeing. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.